हेलो। Oh, like if people are already joined. Uh, hey, hello guys. Are you able to hear me? If you are able to hear me, can you please ping in the chat if you are able to hear me? Okay. Uh, so we'll start at 8:15. We'll still wait for a couple of more minutes to for the people who are still joining. And Saurabh, your question I'll answer a bit later in the conversation. Okay. Let's start now. So, first of all, give you a brief introduction about myself. I am Akshay from 2016 batch. LNCTE CS branch. I got selected in tech systems from campus, and I've been with with tech systems for almost 4 years now. I started, like, since joining test systems, I have worked in multiple domains, starting from automation, then your desktop application development, then some sort of experience on microservices, some exposure on Linux, and then for the past 2 years, I've been working as an iOS developer with the company. So in this conversation, I'll mostly be covering about. I'll try to give you a brief introduction about what mobile application development is, and then we'll see if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. Okay, so before we get into mobile application development, I wanted to cover one thing about technologies that are there. Like, would come across several technologies nowadays, like big data, you have data science, you have ML, AI, you have AR and VR, and then you have your legacy technologies, that is Java, .NET, then comes Android, iOS. So how do they stack up against the up and coming technologies? So I wanted to address that first. So though the market is be there is a trend that can be observed towards the new technologies. uh, the old technologies are going nowhere because most of the legacy systems are written in Java or .NET, and as you can like today the market is shifting towards handheld devices, so your mobile application development is going nowhere. Okay. uh, so in your legacy technologies, you have two type. Primarily, you have three types of application development. First is your desktop application development, then comes your web application development, and the third is mobile application development. Okay. So desktop application development is mostly based on developing softwares for your desktops, right? You have so many applications on your desktops as well, like you have windows based applications on your system that you can use. So those all come under desktop application development. Then there is web application development. As the name suggests, it's a web based application that you are able to uh, uh, leverage over the net, right? And then comes mobile application development. So primarily, you should be like, mobile application is nothing but developing applications for your Android or iOS phones, because today these are the only two OSs that have been mostly worked upon. But mobile application development, there are two types of mobile application development. So one is your native development, the second is your hybrid development. Okay, so what is native and what is hybrid? So native covers the application development for a particular platform. Like if I am an Android developer, I cannot uh, uh, develop application for iOS using the native Android tools. Same is the case with iOS development. So a native iOS developer would only be creating application for iOS based handheld devices, that is iPhone, iPads. But now there is another thing called hybrid application development. So what happens is, uh, rather than creating two applications for different two for the respective platforms, so industry tried to come up with a solution that would be able to create the application directly, that can be rendered separately on both platform, and would work from the same code base. Okay. So iOS development, like I am a native iOS developer. Okay. And but before that, what is like, there are so many things that you can explore in native application sorry hybrid application development. So it started with PhoneGap. So PhoneGap was a company that was started by Adobe, that was later named to Cordova. So this is an Apache based framework that was used to develop application and render on both iOS and Android. Then came Xamarin. Xamarin is usually developed using Visual Studio, and it does the same thing. And then you have React Native. Then there is another tool called Qt Creator. Qt Creator, if you remember, like the first smartphone devices were introduced by Nokia, and that ran on Symbian platform. Though Symbian is not around anymore, but initially it was only Symbian. So Nokia created a tool called Qt Creator, and they developed two languages to work on it: QML and Qt C++. Okay, so the all the Symbian applications were developed using Qt Creator. But once Symbian phones stopped existing, Nokia made it open source, and after that they made it a hybrid application development tool. So what is different in Qt Creator from the other tools is, like, you'll be able to create for any platform, like may it be your Windows, your Android, your iOS, your Mac OS, Linux. You can create applications using Qt Creator from for any of these platforms, and the application that is developed for a particular platform would run seamlessly on other platforms as well. Sorry. Yeah, so this is a hybrid application development. Now the question comes, like, why do we have two types of application development? Like, why do we have native and why do we have your hybrid application development? So, native, as the name suggests, it is specific to a particular platform, and the languages and the tools that are developed for those are developed in such a way that they can leverage those platforms to their full extent. So if there is a requirement for you, for the company to make full use of Android functionalities, rather than going for an hybrid development, they would go for a native development. Okay, and on the same side, native has the plus point that it reduces your requirement. So the same resource can do the work of two resources of native applications. Because in native application, if you're developing for both the platforms, uh, so there will be two resources required, because an iOS resource cannot be expected to work on an Android platform, and an Android resource cannot be expected to work on an iOS platform. But on the same side, you'll need only one hybrid application resource to create the application for both the platforms. So now coming to Android and iOS. Okay, so native application development. So for Android, you usually use Android Studio, and Java was primarily used in that. Java with XML for views. Now there is a new language in picture, that is Kotlin, that is developed by Google. So Android was, the idea behind Kotlin is, like, it has improved on Java, and Kotlin can still be used for backend development as well. When coming to iOS, the development tool, the native development tool that we use is Xcode, and the language that are used are Objective C and Swift. So Objective C is a very old language that was similar to C in uh, some contexts, but Objective C is quite more difficult than Swift. Swift is a very simplified version for application development, and it's a very powerful language to per se. And now the iOS is moving towards Swift UI. So the idea is to make a language that works on Xcode and is able to function as JavaScript, similar to JavaScript. Like, if you have come across JavaScript is a language that is very powerful. Like vanilla JavaScript itself is very powerful, and you have so many flavors for JS. Like, you have Node.js, you have AngularJS, you have React, Express, and Redux, and so many more. Right. So coming to the question, why application development and why not these technologies, the new technologies. Okay, so there is space in the industry, there is space for everything right now. But as the trend is going forward, even though you have these new technologies, but for leveraging those technologies, like even in cloud is giving you a service, but it has to be exposed to something, and some it has to be consumed by something, right? So it would be either your desktop devices or your handheld devices. But the trend is so that we are minimizing the requirement of desktop in our day-to-day life. Like everything is available on mobile, and everything is moving towards mobile because of ease of access, right? So let's say you have your social media profiles, you can access them through your desktop or laptop or whatever, but we end up, yeah, accessing them more often than not through handheld devices. And that is the case with other utility application that we have. Like your banking can completely be accessed through your device, right? And banking is going nowhere. And even if they implement these new technologies, whatever, like let's say big data, elastic search, or anything, they have to be consumed by something, right? So this is where mobile devices comes into picture. And since mobile devices are not going anywhere, so mobile application development is here to stay. Okay, so if you have any questions pertaining to this, I would start answering them. And there was one question from Saurabh Srivastav: How shall we prepare for interviews? Like, there is no particular answer to that question. Everybody has their own approaches, but there is a template approach that mostly is suggested. So mostly, like most of the companies, like I believe, mm, programming or your development is nothing but your extension of analytical abilities. So even if you're developing your logics, at the end of the day, you are either developing logic or doing something related to logic. If you get into IT, right? So what I would suggest is, first work on your analytical skills, right? Your reasoning is one big part of it. Then you have your aptitude. So aptitude does does not serve as a entrance test for interviews or a screening test for interviews. Aptitude would be required for you in your professional life as well. So your aptitude is your ability to assess the situation, assess the questions that are in front of you, and come up with a solution. So even if you give your aptitude test, what is that? You have a question, and you have to come up with a solution with a logic, right? So it is nothing but extension of that logic that you would be using in your professional life. So aptitude and reasoning are two important things that one should focus on. Then there are core subjects of CSIT if you're trying to get into a core development profile. So as you might have heard from previous sessions, the core subjects would be your DS, algorithms, OS, CN. Like CN, if you're not going for a computer network specific job, so you don't have to get into too deep into CN, right? You just need to know the basics of CNs, the TCP layers, the TCP IP protocols, the different protocols that are used between for communication. Like for mailing, for sending mail, SMTP is one of the most famous protocols that you use. Then you have triple P protocols. Then you So this is something like that. And you should know how networks work, how the packets work, like the layers, the 7 layers that you have in TCP/IP model. You should know the functioning of that. You should know the difference between IP addresses and your MAC addresses, how they are different from each other. You should know the function of sockets. What do sockets do? So if you cover this, mostly your CN is covered. And one more core subject I would suggest would be databases. Okay, so DBMS is one thing that is widely used. Okay, but DBMS, like if once you get into industry, there would be SQL and NoSQL. That is another story. But DBMS concepts you should know. Normalization is one thing that is mostly asked in DBMS. Apart from that, in when coming to operating systems, uh, mostly one thing that everybody overlooks is memory management, right? And when you are starting your css C++ or C classes, there must be a discussion about must have been a discussion about how the memory stack looks like, and what are the memory segments that you actually access when declaring a variable, when you're creating a dynamic variable which uh, segment is accessed, right? You should actually focus on that, because as you grow into your career, not even for your interview, once you start your professional career, uh, once you start your professional career, uh, so there is one thing called memory management, right? And no matter what sort of development you do, uh, memory management is something that is involved in everything. Like I can be a core Java developer, a backend developer, using Python and Django to create the web services to be exposed and consumed by some end systems. Or I can be writing a UI, just a HTML page to consume those services. I should know memory management, because every system, irrespective of what kind of system it is, when I say system, I'm referring to all the applications that are consuming anything, like all the sorry, not applications, all the devices. It can be your desktop PCs, laptops, your iPads, or your Android tablets, phablets, or phones, right? Or it can be an intermediary system where the application is running. It has limited memory allocated for your application to run. So if memory is not properly managed, the purpose of the application would be hindered. Like if you are developing a web service that is supposed to be able to handle n number of calls, and if the memory is not managed properly, there might come a case when there are so many requests that you're not able to actually serve them in time. In mobile applications, it happens like if you're consuming more memory, at one point your application may crash. So memory management is something that is very important, and if you know that, that is a big help in securing lateral interviews. Like you right now you would be gunning for your campus interviews, but later in your professional careers you'll go for lateral switch, right? You'll switch from one company to another, and if you know memory management, that is a big help. And coming back to algorithms and uh, your data structures, right? So this must have been told to you time and again that these are the basic blocks for your programming. Right. Let me tell you something, that it is not like you cannot create an application without using data structures and algorithms. Like there might be a possibility that you will be able to create a certain application that does a certain work without using data structures and your algorithms, but it won't be efficient, right? Efficiency is something that comes into picture, like when you're using your application. If I create two applications, they perform the same function, right? But one application is optimized, like it is giving me response in a timely manner, and in one application where I have not used data structures or algorithms, and I've come up with my own logic, so chances are the code would not be optimized. So it might happen that let's say uh, I have to wait for a considerable amount of time to perform an activity. So I'll move towards the one that is fast, right? So that is how we switch our phones as well, like even your devices as well. Once your device becomes slow, you move to a faster device, right? And if the same would be the case with applications. If an application is more robust and more efficient, I would move towards that rather than having an application that is taking more time, right? So data structures and algorithms are nothing but they are tools that help you in developing efficient logic. Okay, so mostly these are the five six things that you have to work on the like work as far as your subjects are concerned. Then another thing is yeah, there is one important thing when you're showing up for your interviews, uh, that is your resume. Right. So your resume should be very concise. It should not contain anything that is of no relevance. Everything that is there has to be relevant, and you should be able to defend that if questioned upon it. It should not be like I have mentioned data. Sorry, I have mentioned big data as a skill in that resume, and when I'm questioned about it, I'm not able to answer it. Right? Whatever you write in your resume, you should be able to answer. You should be able to justify that statement, even if it's if just a simple statement, very common statement that everybody writes, a hard worker. Like you should be able to justify how can you, like how would you prove that you are a hard worker, right? So whatever you write in your resume, you should be prepared. You're prepared for a question, cross question on that. Okay. And one more thing that you can work on is your GDs. Not all companies take GDs, but some of the companies would take GDs. So GD is one thing that would get you through. If you are good at discussions, it would get you through the screening rounds of the process. Like preparing for interviews is fine, but it is of no use if you're not able to reach to the interview, right? Okay, there is a question from Gaurav Agarwal. What languages we should know for developing hybrid apps? Okay, so Gaurav, there are so many ways of going about it. So it depends on what you choose. So Xamarin is one that is used with Visual Studio. That is a language. Xamarin is a language that would help you in that. Now, then there is a framework called Ionic framework. There you use Angular JS to create the UI elements. Then there is a different approach, a different tool altogether. That is your Qt Creator. So there for your UI you use QML, and for your logic you use Qt C++. Then another, the most famous right now is React Native. Okay, so React Native is a language that you use. Okay, and it with React Native you would be with React Native you have to know CSS, because all the UI components would be based on a CSS file. Apart from that, there is a commonly used concept of Redux with React Native for data transfer between the different layers in your application. And yeah, that's about it. Like there is no particular language that there's no particular approach to uh, hybrid application development. People choose their approaches based on their requirement and their feasibility, right? And Hemant has asked, sir, which platform is better for coding? Um, I'm not very clear about the context of this question. If Hemant can elaborate on this, it would be better. Rather than me answering something that is not relevant to his question, I would prefer if we can get some context on what you're looking for in that answer. Does anyone else have any questions that I may be able to answer? Hi, Anuj sir. It's nice to be associated with TNP again. And okay, so before I get into some highlights on resume, there is something the most popular languages for coding. Okay, so basically, like there are so many languages out there right now, and so let me divide them as into two groups. I'll call them legacy languages and the new languages. Okay, so when I'm talking about legacy languages, it would be mostly Java and your C sharp, and then comes the new languages that are actually covering a lot of market today. Like Python is one thing. PHP used to be a very famous language, but nowadays PHP support is going nowhere. But the jobs for PHP are not as many as they used to be. Then you have your Golang, right? Let's focus on these four languages first, and then we'll talk about two more languages. Okay, so Java and C sharp, though they are own languages, first of all they have not been stagnant. Okay, so the opportunities are there because most of the legacy systems, the old systems that were developed, are using Java or C sharp, and it's not easy for a business to move out of a legacy system to a new system, because code migration is a very big hectic process in when comes to a big organization, right? Because your system does not just comprise of your application. There would be several applications that would be interacting with each other. Okay, and the backend, in the backend, when you talk about backend, your databases would be of a particular type, right? And when you do migration, you have to make sure that all the data that is stored in your database has to move. And when we talk about actual enterprise level data migration, it consists of even like billions of records. And so companies usually try to avoid shift migrating their code to a new language. And though the opportunities might seem more for the new languages, but these languages, the old languages are more stable, but they have their shortcomings. So, um, how to choose between a stable language, a legacy language, and a new language? So that depends on your priority, how you want to shape up your career. So most of the new things that are coming up, that are supported, that have more support from your new languages rather than your old languages. But if you want stability, and um, like if you want to get into a field that is going nowhere, and you want job security, then your legacy languages is your it should be your go-to language. And now talking about the new languages, so what is different between the new languages and the old languages? So old languages are structured in a particular way, and now it's not easy to rewrite those things. The new languages that are coming up, they provide you more functionalities, and they are more community driven. So when I say community driven, so Java support is mostly from, it used to be from Sun Microsystems, now it is owned by your Oracle. So most of the supports and the changes that are going to come uh, in Java are going to be released by Oracle. And same is the case with C Sharp. C Sharp is managed by Microsoft. So Microsoft is the sole entity which would make improvements or changes to these languages. But on the other hand, the new languages, the Python, Golang, and everything, they are more community driven. So even if there is a functionality that cannot be achieved right now, there is a community working day in, day out, like community that is comprised of people like us. Like these are the open source contributors that would come up with a library to achieve that functionality. So the community support makes these new languages quite easy to use and sorry, uh, quite easy to use and quite powerful. Like in Python, if you want to perform some operations on your number, there is a library called NumPy that can be easily leveraged to perform n number of operations. But at the same time, Java, if there is no support for that particular thing in Java, then you have to write your own logic. So these languages, and on the other hand, the implementation of these languages is quite easy. So most of these languages come up with their own memory management. You don't have to take care of any memory there. Like it is better if you take care of memory, but like I can talk about Swift. So Swift has something called ARC. uh, like Java has garbage collector, ARC is Swift's garbage collector, but uh, it is specific to a application. Java has a garbage collector that runs throughout the whole platform, and ARC works for a particular application. So first of all, it is only responsible for an application that it is associated with. So memory management would be fast for that application, and you don't have to worry about any dangling pointers or anything, because ARC would take care of it for yourself. So the new languages that are coming up, it's making programming easy. Like even Golang that was introduced by Google, it's very powerful, and they give you so much support for leveraging the new technologies, the up and coming technologies that are there. Like they have so many libraries uh, uh, to use AR, VR, then AI. You don't even have to write ML code yourself. You already have ML libraries available for these languages that have already that somebody wrote, and it will be able to handle most of your requirements. And there are two other languages, that is C and C++. So those C and C++ have been the oldest languages that are primarily used in application development, but they are, and we have moved towards new and fascinating languages. There is still a very big business that is being driven by C and C++. So they, at the core, they are very simple. Like it's the first thing that we learn in CS, writing code in C or C++. But the opportunities are very, uh, what should I say, very niche. Like the people that are working on C and C++, they manage to actually get one of the highest salaries in the industry. Like system programming is something that is not very talked about in our industry, but that profile is so vibrant that it is not going to go anywhere. Like uh, yeah, these languages, the other languages will come and go, they have to be changed accordingly, but system programming is going nowhere, because at the core of your systems, like even your OS, everything is written using C++ and C. And C and C++ are actually very powerful. Like uh, we come across AI a lot these days. Every company is rushing towards implementing AI in some capacity. Though it might come as a surprise to you, but you can implement AI through C and C++ as well. And I would suggest one should actually learn one of the core programming languages first before shifting to new languages. Uh, I'll tell you why. So when you're learning these core programming languages, C, C++, Java, or C Sharp, they there you get to learn a lot, because memory management, you will never, like memory management. Uh, if I were to compare the learning I would get in Java for this and in Python for this, Java would always come on top. So if you have to understand the principles of computer science, these are the four languages that you should bank on. And once you have a foundation built upon these things, it would be very easy for you to transition to any other languages. Okay, I can quote one example to you. So in this company that I'm working with, I have worked with VB Script, I've worked with Python, I've worked with Java, I've worked with Swift, I've worked with C Sharp, no, not C Sharp, sorry, Objective C, and I have worked with something called web methods as well, right? And if I were actually confined to a particular language, these shifts would have been easy for me. But what I my foundation was built upon was C and C++, so it was relatively easy for me to jump between these technologies. I don't know if I was able to answer your question about the requirement you should, uh, language that you should opt for, but I would say that is your call, that you have to take. Like I cannot take, or anybody else cannot take that call for you. You have to decide what things that you want to achieve, what you want your career to look like, and based on that, you have to decide. Uh, Ayush Dubey has asked, what are the other skills a student must have, which is required in company? Okay, so I don't know, but I know that you might have heard this thing time and again, like the qualities that we mention in our resumes, that I am a team player, I am good at understanding, I'm a good conversationalist. These things might seem trivial to most of you, because you would be like, these are very basic things, and like you know about this, but these, to drive a project, these things are the factors that actually enable or disable a project. So right now, you wouldn't have worked in a big team, like, but once you are getting into an organization, the team size would vary from 10 to 50 to 60. Like I myself worked in a project that had 60 people in it, right? So if I'm an individualist, as far as my work is concerned, I may be a very good resource individually. I may be a very good individual contributor, but from company's perspective, a guy who is not doing as good as I am doing, but is able to manage with people, is a better resource than I am. So that is one thing that companies will surely look for. Then the other thing is your conversational skills. So when I say conversation, there are two things that we usually talk about: listening and hearing. Right? Listening is you just listen to the person, and sorry, I would like to go back. So listening and hearing is just like somebody said something to me, and I just took the literal meaning out of it. And hearing is like I am trying to understand his perspective, why his or her perspective, where they're coming from, right? So when you're having a conversation between teammates, the more you try to understand what the other person is trying to convey, the less time you would require to actually solve a problem, because it happens so many times, so many times that the people that are working with you are not from the same background that you come from, and their understanding of something might be different from yours. And if you're just hearing what they're saying and not trying to actually comprehend what they're trying to say, it would be a hurdle for the team going forward. Okay, and there is one other thing that you guys may focus on, that is your managerial skills. So there are two types of managerial skills. First is your self management, and the other is your people management skills. So though you would I'll put it very bluntly, in IT there are so many people that have very fragile egos, and if you go there and be one of them, first of all you would not be able to work properly, you'll lose your peace of mind, and the project would not go anywhere, and it will hinder your progress in the company as well. Okay, but if you are able to manage those persons, like the people with conflicting egos, if you're able to manage and maneuver your way through them, so not only it would be helpful for your project, it will later help you in your career, because eventually you'll try to move towards managerial roles, right? And you'll come across very uh, petty complaints about your from your reportees about their colleagues, like this is he or she is talking to me like that, and this, and if you have paid attention to managing the people that you worked with at the start of your career, you would be actually equipped enough to handle those situations. So why are we talking about these three things? Is because companies, though they run on talent, eventually it's a team that drives a project, and it would not be in the best interest of company to actually club two people, two very good individuals together who are not able to interact with each other. Rather, if I were to have two people who are mediocre in performance, they are not the best of the lot, but they are able to communicate with each other and manage things around it, and manage the project, the progress of the project, and are able to manage themselves in pressure, they are more of an asset than an individual contributor who does not know how to work with a team. Okay, I hope that answered your question. And there, Tarun sir, Anuj sir suggested one thing to highlight more on resume. So, okay, so resume is something. It's a concept. I would say it's a concept that is implemented in so many different ways. Somebody would tell you do this, do that. So, which template to follow, that is up to you. But there are some core things that should be mentioned in your resume. Let's talk about that. Okay, first of all, if there is something that highlights your managerial skills or management skills, you should mention that. It should not be like I am able to do this. There should be a proof of it that this guy has done this. So like for TNP volunteers, that can be a point, that we have managed so many interview drives. So like industry, uh, the people from industry have been in your place, they know what you're going through. So this statement, they would understand the magnitude of the problem that you dealt with. So whatever qualities you have and skills you have, if you have something to showcase that, don't forget to mention that. There would be a question, like somebody correctly suggested in one of the previous sessions about the weaknesses and strengths that you do. So like some people don't write about it, some people opt to write about it, but if you choose to write about it, you should make sure that your weakness is something that could be worked upon. It should not be something that is personal to you and has no impact whatsoever to the company. So even if you improve that personally and it does not add value to the company, then it's of no consequence to the company. So you have to be selective about what strengths and weaknesses you choose to write about. Okay, then the third thing would be your skills, the languages that you have worked with and all that. that is not that of that much importance in comparison to one more section that is called your project section. So whatever you have worked upon, so okay, when you're going for an interview, you either the interviewer can drive that interview or you can drive that interview. So if you have a good enough resume and you give them enough questions, prospective questions from your resume, then your interview would be based around your resume. But if you're not writing relevant stuff and you're not showcasing your projects and your skills properly, so it's in their hand how to take what direction the interview would take. Okay, so there you all must be working on your final projects now, right? Or you would start from seventh semester. So make sure whatever your, however small or however simple your project is, make sure that you know the in and out of your project. Okay, it should not be it's a accepted fact that many of us would go out and buy the projects. That's fine, but make sure you know what is being done in that project. Like if I were to ask you, what is this project, it should not be a one line statement, okay, it does this. You should be able to first of all elaborate your functioning of the project in the introduction itself. Like, it should not be like if you are making a LMS, leave management system, let's say leave management system, it should not be like it's a system that manages the leaves of the employees they have access to and all that. The description should actually cover the features that the project offers. Like this leave management takes in account, it calculates the number of days in that time period automatically. uh, uh, it calculates the number of leaves the person has, and the login functionality is a very big plus. You should know if you are creating a system, if you are presenting a project that has a login functionality, then I would say even if you don't know how it is being done in your project, go through the documents available online, how that is done, because login is something that is being used in most of the applications. And if you give an opportunity to the interviewer to talk about it, that is a discussion that can go on for half an hour, 45 minutes in itself. So you should be equipped enough and prepared enough to answer those questions. So in one of my technical interviews which I sat for, I had mentioned three projects that I worked on. One with a internship that I did in third year, and two minor and major projects. So I had so much to speak on those, and I gave enough opportunities for the person sitting in front of me to ask about those things, that our interview, our discussion never went out of scope from my projects. And on the other hand, there might have been some better candidates that were sitting with me in that interview, but what they lacked was they gave up they wrote so many things and gave the, like, they let the interviewer drive the interview. So that is a very big mistake that you can commit, because like when you are sitting for your first campus, you would be nervous, and the first campus is never easy. Okay, so you have to make sure that it goes in your way. So writing relevant stuff and being prepared with all that is written, that is mentioned in your resume, is a very good thing to have. Because if you give, from my personal experience of interviewing people as well, so if a candidate comes along that has a very relevant project mentioned, so most of the discussion that we would be having would be about the project rather than going into some other technologies. Like people will ask you about technologies, but how much they ask depends on how you shape your resume and prepare regarding it. Okay. And yeah, like I said, there are so many templates available online. You can opt for anything, but make sure that your resume is very concise. First thing, elaborate. Elaborate only to the extent that you need to. You don't need to write paragraphs in your resume, or you don't need to write mention points that are very like that do not have any relevance to the company that is looking to hire you. Like if you say that you have played a sport, and if you're trying to mention it, mention the place that you got, mention the role that you played in that sport, right? Like there is one way of showcasing your skills, that is the question is being asked directly to you. There is another way that you yourself explain this thing. So if I say that I led the team in, let's say, Nodals, so it says that I had leadership skills, and that gives a point of discussion for to my interview, to my interviewer, right? And it's upon you if you opt to write the objective or not. Like initially mostly people do write it, but right now the resume that I am going with, I have removed the objective long back. So because objective is something that is a point of discussion, so you can uh, that rather than mentioning it in the resume, when you are actually introducing yourself and the question comes of why are you looking for a change, that objective can be your answer. And if it is already mentioned in your resume, it makes it repetitive. Like, but at the end of the day, it's your call. Everybody structures their own resume according to themselves. Okay. uh, so there is a question from Akshay Sinha about what are the minimum requirements to be surely there in a techie which could make him a ready to work personal. Okay, so first of all, when companies are hiring from campuses, they're not looking for full-fledged developers or full-fledged software engineers. They are trying to look for people who they can mold into a particular role, right? So even if you don't have the professional expertise of being a ready to serve engineer, it's better if you focus on your core fundamentals. Because campus placements, there is a big difference if you go for a campus placement and an open campus placement, right? uh, the First of all, you know your competition, and the competition is limited. And when you appear for open campuses, there are so many panels available, right? And the competition and the scale of it is much bigger than your in campus placement. So that is the reason why Ellen City is in top, or is on top in Bhopal, because we have the most in premises placement drives in comparison to other colleges. Like studies and everything is fine, but right now Ellen City is driven by campuses only. Right. And you might have heard this statement being tossed around that in colleges you have to study yourself. So, if you are getting an opportunity, you have to make sure that you can count it in. And how to do it? So you might be applying for an Android developer role with a company, but you don't have an exposure to Android, and companies don't actually expect you to have that exposure. They are looking for people who are able to solve problems. So uh, there is one thing, if you have explored it yet or not, if you have not, you should actually go and explore it. That is competitive programming. So your data structures and algorithms are just tools. Okay, you can learn them, you can cram it, but when you're sitting for an interview, uh, more often than not you would be asked about the implementation of them. Like they'll give you a scenario where you have to come up with a logic that actually leverages your algorithms and data structures, and that would only come from your competitive programming, because your syllabus would not cover that. The syllabus is designed as such that you know everything, and how to actually choose which thing is correct or not. In theory, you probably might know, but when it comes to practical, you have to be able to identify it. So competitive programming would help you a lot. If you are a competitive programmer and you have a rank on CodeChef, HackerRank, HackerEarth, or Top Coder, or there are so many coding platforms out there. So if you have a rank, make sure that you mention that. That gives you brownie points in your interview. And there is no sure short way to know uh, if you would be getting selected or not. What you can do is prepare yourself. And preparing yourself, if you are sitting for an interview, the five subjects that we talked about, you should know them, because everything that is going to happen, that is going around in the industry, are structured around those things. Even the cloud technologies would be using some of those concepts somewhere. So to better prepare yourself, make sure that you know, like I would say, OS, DBMS, DS, and Algo are the four subjects that you should focus on for every interview. And if you're sitting for a company that works in computer networks, then computer networks takes priority over everything else. And the other thing is, uh, you should work on your comprehension skills. So there might be a situation that like I have seen people uh, getting rejected because they actually didn't understand what the discussion was going on about. So if you are having a discussion, it should not be one way communication, that the interviewer is just asking you a question. You should be able to understand where he might be coming from, where he or she might be coming from, and uh, actually, if you think about it, what other implications of this problem might be there. So you are able to actually if you are able to comprehend the question better, you'd be able to answer the question better. And like I said before, there is no short way of getting clearing an interview. More often than not, a, you the result of your interview may go south just because the day was not right for you. So and there comes the other thing, that you should be positive. It should not be like, you should not second, even if you are not fully prepared, you should not start second guessing yourself. If you start second guessing yourself even before the interview starts, you would never be able to answer the questions. And when you're sitting in an interview, be confident about your answers. It should not be like, you should not go round and round about your answer. It should be very concise answer that you give. And if cross questioned about about an answer that you gave, try to stick to your narrative. And the other thing is, if you don't know something, it's better to say it upfront rather than trying to fox your way around it, because the person that is sitting in front of you probably knows way more than you can imagine about that. And if you're trying to fool him, that is that that is a very bad impression, that gives a very bad impression of you on that interviewer. And at the end of the day, your success or failure of the interview would depend on your impression on the interviewer, right? So even if you're not able to answer everything correctly, but if you're able to convince them to some extent that you have the aptitude to actually be on that level, so you will still get the job because your impression on that person is right. Okay. Okay. The Sudhanshu Sharma has asked what should be the approach for learning React and Redux. Okay, so first of all, uh, Redux comes later in the picture. First, you need to understand what React is, how React works, and if you want to start with React, a good starting point would be learning JavaScript first, because React is eventually based on JavaScript, your vanilla JavaScript, and the best approach would be uh, to rather than going for a tutorial, the whole full-fledged tutorial series about React Native development, come up with an idea for an application, that a small, very small application. Let's just say that is just takes your name in, your age in, your date of birth in, and some other fields, and it is able to display that in a different view. That can be a very normal starting point, but at least you will get to understand how things are happening. So first you need, before actually jumping into the sea that is React Native, first you need to evaluate what it is. So it is like it is the same with any other development. So if you have time, go for a full fledged course. That is always better. But if you don't have time, and since you would be actually entering the industry, and there would be many a time you would be required to actually take upon a new technology within weeks. So the approach that you should follow is you should just look for small, like you should start small, and be specific about your requirements. You don't need to know the whole React Native. You should just know whatever you're trying to build. So whatever you're trying to build, that thing you should know in and out of, and you should be able to decide whether this component is better here or that component is better here. uh, so like in industry, even if I come from a React Native background, it's not guaranteed that I would be given a profile that is related to React Native. So it might be a situation where I'm expected to learn a new technology, and right? And there would be so many people competing with you when you join the company, right? So the how do you progress, right? Your skill uh, is paramount, but the other thing is how do you fare in comparison to your competition. If you're doing a particular thing the same way the others are doing, how does it make you different, how does it make it stand out? So if you are competing with so many people, it is better to have a learning approach that allows you to learn quickly. So I would say, if you have time and if you want to actually learn React Native and Redux to the core of it, go. Uh, you are most welcome to go for a full-fledged Udemy course, or so in on Udemy there is a very good course pertaining to React Native, and it covers everything. But I would suggest follow a approach that is more robust, that is more adaptable to situation. It should not be like you have to take 6 months to learn a technology. And there is something called learning on the fly. Like today, I have to implement something. I have not implemented that thing ever. I can either sit and go through all the documents, or I can just try to figure out how it is implemented and try to learn while implementing it. So you can try it, but from my experience, sitting and learning, going through all the documents is going to take more time. It might be the more wholesome approach, but the quicker you adapt to situation, the better it is. So start with a small application, come up with a small idea, or you don't even have to have an original idea of yourself. You can just try to simulate something that has already been implemented by so many other applications. So you can just try to do a Google search from your application. It's a very, you just need to create one screen, one component, and you just have to make sure that there is a button, and on the click of that button there is a API call at the backend. That's it. Start with this small, and as you understand this, you would get more idea about how you can implement other things. So uh, I am serving as a senior iOS developer right now, but I have not taken a professional course for it. So I was working with Java. An opportunity came along. They wanted me to work on iOS. I shifted without second thought, and I still haven't gone through a professional course. I just, whatever I explained right now, I the same approach I followed. I just took the problem at hand and tried to figure out how to find a solution for that. And since I am working as a senior iOS developer now rather than an iOS developer, so I think that should be proof enough that this solution works. Okay. Okay. So again, like, even if you are going for hybrid application development and courses, so first you need to narrow down on on the technology that you want to use. It For the first thing is that it cannot be that you just uh, jump head straight inside a technology. That technology is there. Hybrid development is a very huge domain. There are so many technologies there that are doing the same thing. So first you need to figure out what works for you. So you can try out Ionic framework that uses AngularJS for UI development. Then React Native is one that we have already discussed in extensively. Then your Xamarin is still a very viable option for hybrid development. But like, you have to come up, first decide if you're choosing hybrid development. So there would be challenges in that, like, they native development and hybrid development have both have challenges, different, though different, but they both have challenges pertaining to each approach. So hybrid application development, the most common challenge that you would face is how the application behave on two different platforms. Is sometimes something you are trying to create something, and that particular thing is being rendered properly on Android devices, but it is not being rendered properly on iOS devices. So you would many a time find yourself trying to figure that out. Okay. And if you take hybrid development, so hybrid development is a very new technology. Not very new, but I would say it has gained popularity quite recently. And so people who have generic requirements, the companies who are trying to build generic applications, that are more likely to approach for hybrid application developers. And like, there is a product based company that just want to get an application out that does very basic features. So they are more inclined towards hiring a hybrid application developer. And so rather than taking the bookish approach of going through the courses and doing things, I would still suggest come up with a okay. So you can try building an e-commerce application and try integrating a payment gateway in that. Okay, it's a very uh, very common application that you see these days. But when you once you start actually implementing it, uh, it would cover many things for you, like your search criteria and how you search things. That would be covered in that. Your payment gateway is a very big uh, if you are able to actually create a payment gateway integrate a payment gateway inside your application, that is always a plus, because most of the applications are going to move towards monetizing their applications. And monetization once monetization comes into picture, payment gateways would for sure make their way into that application. Login, try giving a login functionality to that. Try reading about sessions and all that, and try creating this application using React and Redux. So you would find so many examples that have already implemented it. You can take them as template and try to build upon it. Okay. And so I like for hybrid application development, I would suggest the if you're looking for a particular courses. Uh, so there is a course on Udemy. Let me see if I can find that course. Yeah, give me a sec. I forgot the name of the guy who wrote that lesson. Okay. If you still require this, reach out to me through any of the means. I'll tell you the. I'll try and find out what was the course name, and I'll tell you the exact course name for Native and Redux if you are actually looking for a course. And rather than I would still suggest, rather than going for a full-fledged course, it would be better to incorporate adaptive learning into your skill set, uh, because in industry you would not have time to spend so much time to spend on actually going through a traditional course to learn a thing. And now there is Suraj Singh's question. I hope I answered Shubham Dayal's question in the discussions that we have had till now. And now we would take Suraj Singh's question: how to manage preparation of gate and placements simultaneously. Uh, if you are actually serious about gate, uh, let placements, the preparation for placement, take a backseat and actually focus on that. Because why I'm saying that is because in gate you have I don't know how many subjects you have, but I know for sure that most of the important subjects that we have talked about in this conversation, they are covered in gate. So when you're actually trying to prepare for gate and spending time on it, so you are like sorry you are in turn preparing for your interview questions as well. But if you want to give placements a priority, the approach would be different, because in placement you would be more focused on the question rather than the theory. And gate, it is more about theory, theoretical knowledge, and the concepts that govern the whole functioning of a particular feature, right? Though theory and practical should go hand in hand, but if you are short on time and if you're trying to juggle both the things together, first decide what you want to do. Like if your post graduation is of paramount importance to you, you should focus more on gate, and you should just do a day-to-day basis kind of preparation for interview rather than going for in-depth preparation for interviews. It can be like you should go through like okay so if you're short on time, sorry, I might be going off topic here a bit, but I'll connect it back to this discussion that we were having. uh, if you're short on time, so there is a website called Geeks for Geeks, and for most of the companies they have a question bank. And it's reality that there are like most of the questions that exist and that can be asked have been asked in various interviews. So even irrespective of the interviewer that is coming to interview you, um, they would be asking from some questions that have been asked in their own interview processes previously. So it's a matter of actually you have a bank question bank, and you if you are short on time, rather than going for actual theoretical knowledge, you can focus on those questions, and that may not give you the whole idea about that concept, but that will make you understand enough to answer a question if asked about it. And now coming back to our main topic, so if gate is your priority, so what you should do is whenever you're appearing for an interview, you should take some time out for your preparation for interview only 2 or 3 days before the interview is supposed to happen. And you can visit these websites, and there are so many testimonials written available by the people who have been interviewed by these companies, and they'll give you the questions there are so many questions available all online, and they more often than not they are just the questions that are going to be asked to you are just an extension of what has already been asked. So if you're preparing for gate, and in the meantime there is a company that is visiting your campus and you want to sit for it and appear for it, rather than halting your whole preparation for gate, you can just take some time out in your days, just to starting 2 3 days before your actual interview, and start going through these questions that are available on the internet. And okay, to which extent one should learn Java before going in for campus? Um, so first of all, they don't look for a particular language while while you appear for an interview. Even if you are applying for a Java role, it is not since you are a fresher, it is not required for you to be a Java developer already. So if you are a C++ developer that knows programming, you would still qualify for that role. Coming back to the extent of Java you should learn, that would vary from company to company. So some companies actually are looking for proper development roles, and some companies are just trying to identify individuals that can suit their mode of working, right? So most of the uh, what it's called bulk recruiters, they won't focus specifically on your Java skills. If they are coming to your campus, they would be more concerned about if you know the concepts, like the OOPS concept, that you if you're clear about OOPS concepts or not, if you know data structures or not, if you know algorithms or not. But if you are appearing for a specifically, like if you are projecting yourself as a Java resource, then prepare like core Java is nothing actually. Like core Java is just another language that you're working with. If you want to get into Java properly, then you have to learn advanced Java. And when advanced Java comes into picture, you have your framework, Spring, Hibernate, Bootstrap. So if you are trying to pitch yourself as a Java developer, and if you are trying to get a job as a Java developer, it would be better if you could actually explore these things before going in for an interview, and you explicitly mention these things in your resume. And there would be so many specific things that are specific to Java. So that is one thing that you can work on. So there are something called JSF, for hybrid development also there is something called something in Java. Uh, I am forgetting its name. Sorry. Yeah. So the extent of it, actually nobody can actually tell you the extent of how much to learn in Java, because Java itself cannot be completed. Like there is no end to Java, that we can say that okay, 50% of complete Java is this much. It's just that you can opt for particular topics in Java that you must prepare. So OOPS concepts are a must. You should understand the concept of inheritance, and the most commonly asked question: How would you implement multiple inheritance in Java? And then you have so many other things. Java server faces are there. Then you have your Spring Boot. You have Hibernate, and so many other free ORM frameworks that you have. And so OOPS is one thing that you should cover in Java. Irrespective of the language, I would say you should cover OOPS concept. Then, if you are going for pertaining something pertaining to Java, there should be a project in your resume mentioned that clearly mentions the use of Java, and that should highlight the new and upcoming technologies, not technologies, the changes in Java that are happening, because languages keep evolving, right? And so every time a new version of a language comes out, there are so many things that get deprecated. So if you are projecting yourself as a Java developer, then you should know what things are deprecated already, and you should not you should know what changes you can make in an application that has that particular implementation to for it to conform to the new Java standards. And rather than focusing on a particular language for a interview, focus on the concepts more, because even if you are selected for a Java role, there is no guarantee that once you actually enter the company you would be given a Java role. So the more flexible you are as a resource, the more you would be highlighted in the company. And so IoT and its scope. So IoT, as the name suggests, it's Internet of Things. It's a network that we establish between devices that in turn would send a signal to some particular receiver that is expecting that response, and uh, and you have to calculate that, right? So right now, the for IT, the time is so good that every domain has work. Like there are so many things that are being carried out in every domain. We may be it IoT, be it your AR, your VR, your mobile application development, your desktop application development. What I'm trying to say here is, if you are interested in IoT, uh, you should go for it, because IoT has not reached its full potential till date, and it is still a evolving domain, and it will continue to evolve, because right now what we are moving towards is we are trying to get everything on our access to everything without actually going to that thing. So if you think about it, IoT eventually does that. It gives you, like, you can just collect information from your devices, whatever microchips that you install, or whatever processor that you install on a particular IoT device that is meant to serve as an IoT device. You can either collect information or you can code some basic functionality on that particular device that can be handled through a remote location, right? So everything is going towards that. There are so many startups that are coming up that track like there is a very common application of IoT in your bus tracking. So they have installed chips, particular chips on each and every bus. That the basic function that they do is they get your that the present location of the bus, and they send that information to a particular endpoint, and then that endpoint distribute it uh, to a client, which from which where end user can actually access that information. So that is a very though it has been implemented, but the scope there is a lot more. Like it can be helpful in your theft detection also. So think about it. So you have your vehicles that get stolen, and once it is said that after 24 hours of stealing, if the that particular vehicle is not found, in 90% of the cases it would never be found again. But if you have a chip installed, if you can in come up with a system that that actually gives you real time location of your vehicle and cannot be tampered with, that is a whole new area that can be explored. And there are so many people that have already started working on it. Like in Bangalore and Hyderabad, you have these location based applications. You have Yulu, you have Bounce, you have uh, so they give you real time application of that particular vehicle. That is one application of IoT that is being used right now. And uh, Bounce is a startup that has so many vehicles around the city. And what it does is it's a keyless vehicle renting system. So you the keys are removed and they install their own devices on that, and own keypad to enable their functionality. What they do is they have an application and they'll show you the location of all the bounce related vehicles in your area, and they'll give you real time location of where the vehicle is. So and they have just started out last year, right? They have gained ground in Bangalore, and they are working on getting some exposure in Hyderabad right now. So they are going to expand their reach. So similar startups are going to come up. And IoT, the like I'm just talking about one particular vertical where IoT is being implemented, but the possibilities are endless for IoT in even if we are speaking about that vertical only. And that is just one vertical. There are so many other verticals that are being that are leveraging the capabilities of IoT. So right now the time for experimenting with something is very good, because everything and anything uh, have some work in the market, and they are going to sustain for next couple of years at least. Okay. uh, do we have any more questions? Um, if not, I'll conclude this discussion with bringing something up to you. As you guys might be aware about coronavirus and the lockdown that is happening. So I don't know if you're aware, but the industries have started struggling, and so even though the market was very ripe up till now, the opportunities, you have to make sure the opportunities that you're you are presented with, you make the most out of it, because industries have started to take a hit from this coronavirus lockdown, because most of the business that India IT industry do comes from US and UK markets. Even though, even if India recovers from COVID-19 pandemic, uh, the situation may not be favorable for the IT industry, because until and unless US and UK are back on their feet, the business, the amount of business that could sustain so many new recruits uh, uh, would not be there, and we don't know how much time it would take for these countries to recover actually. So whatever, uh, we are still not sure how much hiring is going to happen, but whatever companies come to your campus, even if it's a very basic company, make sure that you get a offer in your hand, right? You can transition, yeah, like it might not be that you are getting some great work from the get go. It might be just very simple work that you're getting, but make sure that you have an offer in hand and you are able to actually enter the industry, because it will take some time for the world to recover out of this pandemic. The timing is probably not good for the IT industry right now, because the new sessions are starting and the drives are going to start soon enough. So uh, the recruitment process itself will take a hit. So, though LNCT, TNP department would do everything in their power to get you companies, but you have to make sure that whatever companies they are getting you, whatever companies they are bringing to you, you are prepared to actually be placed in that, because the opportunities won't be as much as it used to be. And on that note, if there is nothing else, we'll stop this. I hope I was able to answer some of the questions that you guys have. You guys can reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, if you have any other queries. And a little about myself. I am a graduate of LNCTE from 2016 batch, and I sat for my first interview through LNCT. That was Tech Systems, and that it's almost 5 years since I sat for that interview. And so, yeah, that was me. And if you have anything, feel free to reach out to me. Bye.